Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today we're going to talk more about all of the topics discussed in the recent Severlin Cordovan Q&A. So this is the fourth video I've done on this and the producer's letter. So the first video I just talked about the producer's letter. The second video was all about the VIP gold roll drama going on in DDO right now. And then the third topic, the third video, was on me speculating what legendary raid, revamped raid, we could possibly get this year. So if you want to catch up, go check out those videos if you haven't seen them. So for this video, this is going to be the last video. We're going to talk about everything else in the Q&A. So it's going to be a bit of a grab bag video. So what I'll do is I go through here. I've watched the Q&A twice, and I've made notes with timestamps. So I will say that the timestamp of what it is they're talking about, like where they talked about it in the YouTube video. So if you want to get all the full context on this, go and look in that timestamp in the Q&A YouTube video, which I will also link below in the description. So before we get started, really quick, in the description there's a link to my link tree where you can find links to my Twitch where I'm streaming regularly, Discord channel if you want to join that. Also, thank you all. I did hit 5,000 subscribers, I think actually today as of the day I'm recording this. So I appreciate you all for helping me hit that milestone. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's get now to the meat and potatoes of the video. So starting at the 9-minute 5-second mark, Severlin and Cordovan talked a little bit about mini expansion versus expansion. So Severlin said Salt Marsh is the kind of scope to expect for the upcoming mini expansion that was announced in the producer's letter. So yeah, so it's going to be similar to Salt Marsh in scope. Pretty obvious there. I think we all knew that. The one thing, though, is that they did mention is that at 1325, Cordovan did confirm that the Vecna mini expansion will include a raid. So unlike Saltmarsh, it will have a raid. So as terms of scope, I would imagine it's going to be probably like several less quests, probably a few less quests, but it will have the raid. So I don't know. I'm thinking maybe like 6 to 8 quests and a raid, and probably wilderness area is what we're going to see. Maybe like an archetype, a paid archetype in there possibly. We don't know, but yeah, it's probably something around there. I would imagine, though, since it does have a raid, it's going to have less quests than Saltmarsh. They didn't confirm that, but I think it's pretty obvious looking at how they scope these things historically. So at the 10-minute 11-second mark, they talked a little bit about Reaper trees. So Severlin said that Reaper trees are heavy on systems and contribute to lag, so they want to move more towards a rank or tier type system. He said that this system also allows them to implement a power sharing system, so distance between new and old players is reduced. So yeah, pretty obvious. I mean, we all know the Reaper trees, they do contribute to load on the servers. They recently actually changed the way those load in to help that, but it's not really surprised to hear that. They've talked a lot in these Q&As in prior ones that they want to move towards some ranked system. So instead of having Reaper trees, you would just get like a flat base number of things you would get for every rank you level up in Reaper for your Reaper XP. So that's probably what will happen. Probably not this year. I mean, they didn't give a timeline really, but since they keep mentioning it, we'll probably see eventually. I mean, maybe next year, maybe the year after, but at some point I would expect the Reaper trees to go away. And they really, if they want to implement this idea that they keep mentioning of the Reaper trees being able to share the power, they really have to convert to a ranked system to be able to do that. So yeah, so be on the lookout for that. I mean, I wouldn't be disincentivized from going after Reaper XP right now. It's that progress is still going to carry over in some form, although certainly players are going to be concerned that in this transition that players who have, say, 100 plus Reaper points are going to get nerfed. It's something that could happen. We'll see. But yeah, be on the lookout for that in the next few years. They keep mentioning it, so it's probably going to happen. At the 14-minute 20-second mark, they discussed Orion and Sarlona free transfer period. So to give you a little context on this, in a recent hardcore season, they had some issues where character transfers, for whatever reason, to Orion and Sarlona servers were not working. So what they told players to do is just get your hardcore characters, just transfer them to any other server, and they'll give you they were gonna give players a time period in the future to transfer those characters from those servers to Orion and Sarlona. So if your main server was Orion and you played on hardcore, they said just transfer it somewhere. Like you could transfer it to Thelanis or Galanda or wherever, and they're going to give players time to do that transfer. Of course, though, they can't do that without also offering free transfers to everybody. They can't there's no way for them from a systems level to just allow it, or at least there's no way that's easy to do on a system level for them to just offer transfers to those characters that did play in that hardcore season. So as a result, transfers are going to be open for everybody. and that starts as of the recording of this video tomorrow. So that transfer period, they didn't discuss this in the Q&A, but last week after the Q&A, they did announce, and they announced since, that the transfer period is going to be February 8th through February 28th. So during that period, if you want to, you can transfer any character from any server to Orient and Sarlona, and some players are concerned that, and SSG also is certainly concerned about this as well, which is why it's going to be a somewhat short transfer period, and it's not going to be repeated unless they change their mind, but I doubt it's going to ever be repeated. But some players are concerned that there's going to be a consolidation in certain servers other than Orient and Sarlona are going to get hung out to dry, that a lot of players are going to try to consolidate and do a de facto server merge with this. And honestly, I have said this before, I think at this point, if they're not going to do a server merge, which we all know is badly needed, then they should just make server transfers free for everybody, like going forward. But they're not going to do that. What they're going to do is just have for 20 days this transfer period open and see what happens. Now, there are limitations, obviously, on things that cannot transfer. So if you're not aware, there's things like, for example, your astral shard balance, your stables for your mounts, things like that, your reincarnation cache, your guild stuff. These things can't transfer. So I've seen a thread actually today in the last few days that just a lot of players very concerned that, say, Galanda or all these other servers are going to be ghost towns after this this server transfer period. My prediction is I don't think we're going to see much in terms of movement here, just because of two things. I think that one, it's just impossible to organize a mass-wide player transfer right now. And two, I think there's too many players who are well established on a certain server who aren't going to want to risk giving that up for hopefully getting more population on a different server. I mean, as of right now, there really isn't, other than Wayfinder, there's not a huge difference between the population between the other servers. Obviously, other than hardcore being a hardcore season. I mean, the regular servers. There's not a huge difference really there's a little bit. If you go to, say, playeraudit.com, you can see the differences with their stats and graphs and things there, but there's not a huge difference. Sometimes the population will be up on one just because they make that the default server for new players, so you'll see a little bit higher population there, but it's pretty similar other than Wayfinder. So I don't think a lot of players are going to transfer right now. I just think too many players are too established. Until we get something more formal, a better way, or at least until SSG announces that these server transfers are going to be free for everyone going forward, which I don't think they're going to do. They should, I think, but I don't think they're going to do that. Unless that happens, I'm personally not worried about it. I don't think that, say, I play on Thelanis, for example, I just don't think people on Thelanis are going to leave for another server. But we'll see what happens. All right, let's continue on. So at the 15-minute, 10-second mark, Severlin confirmed that there is no level cap increase in 2023. So this is something I mentioned in my producer's letter video, and I don't know why, if they're going to announce things like this, why was that not just in the producer's letter? Because yes, well, players like us, anyone who watches this video would have watched, is the type of player who would watch the Q&A, but most players are not going to watch that Q&A. So like, why don't they just put things like that in the producer's letter? I don't get it. If they're going to announce it in the Q&A, just put all that stuff in the producer's letter. But anyways, he also worded his response by saying that many expansion years would not have cap increases, expansion years would. So what we're likely going to see, reading between the lines, is that we're going to see every year going forward. I mean, they have had expansions every year since what? I think 2019 with Sharn, 2020 with Feywild, 2021 with Saltmarsh, 2022 with Isle of Dread. We're going to see the Vecna mini expansion this year. So it's based on their history here, it seems very, very likely that we're going to get an expansion going forward every single year, and that they're going to alternate between doing mini expansions on odd years and full expansions on even years. And the level cap increases are going to be with the full expansions. That's what it sounds like right now is their plan. So I would expect a cap increase next year. So what that tells you is, if you were someone that was holding off, not sure if you should invest time and money into putting together an in-game gear set, I think I can safely say now, based on this information, go ahead and do that. Like, pay for the, use up your jeweler's toolkits and farm that gear, because we're not going to get another cap increase for, 2024, and for all we know, it could be fall winter of 2024. So it probably best case scenario, we don't get a cap increase for another year and a half. Worst case scenario, it's a year. So it's going to be a while. So go ahead and make your in-game gear sets. Don't worry. It's a good time to farm out gear, knowing that we're not going to get another level cap increase but until 2024 at earliest. So good to know. So next, 16-minute, 20-second mark, They talked a little bit about old armor kits. So there's certain cosmetic appearances that are in old armor kits sold through the store that are no longer available. They just briefly said that they're aware of this and they want to eventually make those available. So, no timeline on that, but it's something on their radar to do. 16-minute 40-second mark, they talk actually, I think Cordovan and Sev did they gave out some quick hit information here. So 60-minute 40-second mark, they said there will probably be another Epic Destiny this year. So there's certain classes like, say, Artificer, they don't have an Epic Destiny, so that would be cool to introduce more Epic Destinies this year. They also mentioned that there will probably be another Universal Tree, so not that surprising. I mean, they've done already a lot of new trees this year with the archetypes, so just to make one of those a universal tree instead of an archetype seems like pretty illogical thing. They might include that. See that instead of an archetype, they could include a universal tree possibly with the mini expansion. I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. Kind of like, say, they included, for example, like Vistani Knife Fighter with the Ravenloft expansion. So I would not be surprised at all to see that. So they also said they will probably not be a class as they are focusing on archetypes. Not a surprise. A class is I would expect that to be something that was already planned and they would already have that concept together and announced in the producer's letter. So I'm not surprised at all to see that. There's very likely to not be a class in 2023, a new class. They also said probably no new race in 2023, but maybe in 2024. So again, not surprising. They probably would have announced such a thing in the producer's letter. All right, so at the 17-minute 19-second mark, they said they talked a little bit about iconic completionists. They said there's no plans for that right now, but they think it's a cool idea. I would expect them to do that eventually. Just they're always adding things to the reincarnation system, and it would be a good buffer between them getting to legendary. Because I think that it sounds like it's going to be 2, 4, 6 more years before we get to level 40 to where they can implement legendary reincarnation, which is obviously coming at some point. So I mean, will they implement that earlier than level 40, kind of like they did for Epic Destiny? So Epic Reincarnation, they did have it for a while at, like, say, level 28 when that was capped. So will they do that when we get to, say, level 38 or whatever, or 36 or whatever? Will they go ahead and put that into place and then move it up back to 40 whenever we get to 40? Maybe. But I think that it's pretty likely to assume that there will be some kind of stopgap thing in there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them add iconic completionists to give it more things for the players who love to reincarnate to go after. They always need to give more players things to go for. I mean, a lot of people play this game mainly just to reincarnate. I mean, they don't really care about in-game. So they got to continually give players things to do. Because there are players who have done every single past life there is to do. And those are some of the most dedicated players, some of the most high spending players in terms of money on the game. So they got to continue to give that audience of players things to do. Even if for most players, they're probably like, gosh, I'm never going to catch up. At the 17-minute 57-second mark, they said that they are looking into UI scaling probably soon, but it's not necessarily coming soon. So a lot of people bring this up. So like the game doesn't scale to higher resolutions very well. For example, like all the icons in the game are fixed images and they don't scale. So there's a lot of work for them to do to make the DDO scale properly to higher resolutions higher than 1080p. So they need to do that eventually, but they've discussed this a lot in prior Q&As that one of the problems is they're going to have to redo every single icon in the game because, again, they're all fixed images. So they're going to have to redo all the icons, the UI, all this stuff, like the hotbars things to make it scale. So that'll happen eventually. Several and Ashley said directly, he said looking into UI scaling probably soon. So it sounds like they're going to do that actually. They didn't say when, but will probably happen in the next couple years. They really, it's 2023. They really need to update that aspect of the game. Even though personally, I'm happy with 1080p. I don't have any interest in playing DDO in 4K, but I know some other players do. So, anyways, continuing on at the 19-minute mark. Oh, they also discussed they wanted to revamp avatars. Anyways, at the 19-minute mark, they said there is no news on the free quest code to share. So that was a direct quote because someone asked them about the free quest codes. So if you aren't aware, in 2020 and 2021, they released a free coupon code that allowed all players, whether you're VIP or a brand new player, to basically get all the adventure packs in the game up to that point for free. Now, there have been a couple adventure packs. So, like, for example, Grip of the Hidden Hand, and I think even the Hunter and Hunted pack, which were not included for free in that code because they've come out since that code was released for the last time. But they basically a lot of players have been wondering if they're going to bring that back, and I was too. I was a little surprised they didn't bring it back in 2022, but it seems like they might be holding off. And this is totally speculation on my part, but I would think they would do something for the D&D movie that's coming out, I believe, at the very end of March next month. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do release that coupon code with a new free player a new player push to try to market and attract players. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to see that movie and get back into D&D, are going to be interested in playing D&D, and they're going to go to Google and they're going to type in D&D video games, and DDO is going to pop up somewhere along the line. So there probably will be some kind of influx of new players when that movie comes out. I hope. How much that is to be seen, but it would only make sense from a business standpoint for them to take advantage of that publicity to try to promote promote the game a bit. So that's my prediction. If it doesn't come out in March, if they don't release that code with the movie, then who knows? Your guess is as good as mine to when or if they will ever release that code again. Okay, the 22-minute 10-second mark. They talked a little bit about what quests with Droaam will be made legendary. They didn't give any specifics here, but from their comments, it sounds like they will do at least the attack on Stormreach chain, but they don't know. They haven't decided yet what they'll do outside of that, and they haven't decided yet if they're going to do the free-to-play diplomatic impunity chain. They're going to touch those. My guess is they'll very likely just do attack on Stormreach quests, and that's it. But we can hope for more. We can hope for the Diplo impunity chain to also get legendary treatment, or maybe kind of like they did with Three Barrel Cove, for them to add another quest, a new quest at the end after Siegebreaker. I hope that happens, but if I had to bet money, it's very likely just going to be a legendary attack on Stormreach. Again, I wish they would have put this in the producer's letter. If they were going to say that, like at least confirm at least attack on Stormreach, they could have just put in the letter, instead of saying like this vague language that just said Droaam pack revision. They could have said attack on Stormreach plus possibly more if we can get to it. Not sure on the scale of our revamp yet. They could have put, I mean, obviously that's clumsy wording, but they could have worded it to be a little more specific in the letter. I think the letter was quite scorned by the community. It was just, producer's letter was just so vague. Would have liked to see more specificity, even if I understand they haven't decided yet. They can't confirm. Obviously, they can't confirm certain things, but they could have been more specific than they were. It was such a vague producer's letter. Anyways, 23-minute 40-second mark. They talked a little bit about gifting. So a lot of players ask about this, and they brought this up in other Q&As, and their response here is the same as it's always been. Players have asked and want to be able to gift, points or adventure packs or whatever to other players, but SSG doesn't want to do this because, and they have a very good reason, because it opens the door for fraud. They're concerned that it will encourage people to steal accounts, so they're not going to do that. They're not going to do it for that reason, and it sucks. I don't understand why, but yeah, it is what it is. At the 24-minute 50-second mark, they did discuss one other thing they're doing to increase security. Is they're working on two-factor authentication to help with account security. So if you're not aware what that is, it basically means that if you want to change your password, you'd have to authenticate it maybe from two different sources, maybe email plus possibly a cell phone. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, but it's just added security, so it makes it harder for someone to steal your account. So that's good. But they mentioned that they're aiming for mid to late 2023 on this. The 26-minute mark, they talked about armor class. Someone asked if armor class will get a revamp. Someone said that right now they have no plans to revamp armor class, and he essentially talked for several minutes there, gave a lot of detail explaining exactly why they don't want to do that. So if you want to get all the context there, go to the 26-minute mark in the YouTube video. That's where he talks about it. At the 29-minute 7-second mark, they talked about Psionics, and several said that they love to do Psionics and love to put them in DDO. However, he mentioned that to do them right, that it would just be loads and loads of work. And he started to talk a little bit about Alchemist, and how Alchemist, when they made that class, it took them way more hours to do than they had originally budgeted. So it seems like they're a little weary about doing Psionics. Will we get them at some point? I don't know. It's hard to say, but I know a lot of players want them. So at the 32-minute 4-second mark, someone asked about monster manuals. Not much detail here. They just said, Seven Cordovan just said, yeah, they'll probably do more monster manuals in the future, but no more details other than that. At the 32-minute, 24-second mark, they talked a little bit about hirelings, actually quite a bit about hirelings here. They don't necessarily know here because some players will complain about, hey, my hirelings, it's dumb or it's really weak and it dies. And they talked a little bit about Reaper mode and if hirelings should be effective there. And I agree with what they're saying here. They're not necessarily sure if they want hirelings to be effective in Reaper, since the whole point of Reaper, that mode being introduced, is to encourage players to group, humans to group with other humans. So, and I agree, I don't think hirelings should be effective in Reaper. I think it's okay to have some kind of group player focused mode. I'm okay with hirelings being as they are, that they're pretty they're effective up to elite, and after that, they get they certainly get less effective in Reaper and they die really easily. And they also talked a little bit more about, yes, a lot of the hirelings have really dumb AI. That's obvious, but they did make some good points here that it's not just the AI that's a problem, because a lot of players don't realize that hirelings also are, in being weak, they also don't have the best saves. So a lot of times, if you're say, maybe you're playing a barbarian and you're mashing that hireling heal me button, it's not doing it. A lot of times it's not because of bad AI, it's because the hireling is tripped or held or stunned, something like that. So there's some disconnect there where players think it's the AI, but it's really not. It's just the hirelings, are crowd controlled. So that's a good point. They also mentioned that the hirelings, they don't all operate under the same AI. They were designed differently, so there's certain hirelings that are better than others, or some that are dumb. He even mentioned that they thought there was one that they designed that was intentionally dumb, that will just spam grease. But yeah, so if one hireling isn't working for you, maybe try a different one if you're someone who likes to use hirelings. At the 57-minute, 37-minute, if I can talk, 52-second mark, Sevelin said they do want to do a pet revamp at some point, and it's on their ideas list. So pets, he's referring here to, say, like the wizard skeleton pet or the artificer dog, for example. They want to revamp those at some point. But they gave no more specifics other than that. 39-minute, 30-second mark, they talked a little bit about a Reaper revamp and that how they would do the actual scaling if they were to introduce that system where there is a power sharing. They said it would very likely work to where the Reaper points, or how much power the new players got, would be based on whoever the party leader was. And they said that just from a systems level, that made the most sense. So presumably, if the leader had 0 Reaper points and say another party member had 50 Reaper points, presumably the other party members wouldn't contribute from that, or wouldn't operate from from that 50, like they wouldn't share from the 50 as a base, the 50 Reaper point characters. So presumably in the future, whenever they implement this, you're going to want to find out every time you group who has the most Reaper points and give the star to that person, which is a little weird because the star also has the requirement to actually manage the LFM. So that's, I don't know how I feel about that. That kind of is unfortunate. Because a lot of the times the highest Reaper point player may not have any interest in organizing the LFM, updating it every time you go to a new quest or whatever. So yeah, that's I don't know how I feel about that. I hope they can find some way around that to at least allow maybe there can be 2 different stars, one for the LFM manager and one for whose Reaper bases the Reaper point scaling is based off of. I don't know. I'd hope they can do that. All right, continuing on here at the 40-minute, 49-second mark, they talked a little bit about melee Reaper survivability. They think that with the hit point pass that happened this past year, that melees are in a pretty good shape, is the way they described it. So they said that internally they've discussed possibly touching melee damage received in Reaper, but they're in a bit of a conundrum there because I think it's true, and they talked about this a bit, that I think certainly Reaper has gotten easier because players have, and he goes on to talk, we'll talk about this more, but at the 43-minute, 30-second mark is where he talked about it. But essentially we'll just talk about it now. So he went on to talk about this level of challenge in Reaper, how they're not sure if they want to do that, like actually scale back damage to melees to help melees out that way, because then that makes Reaper easier. And already right now, Reaper is getting easier and easier over time. It certainly is. Like I see people pugging R10s, pretty regularly, and it certainly, as players have gotten more Reaper points as well, but just with scaling and power creep and things, certainly Reaper is getting easier. So at the 43-minute, 30-second mark, they discussed 2 options they theoretically would have in addressing the Reaper getting easier, is just that they could either make existing Reaper harder or create Reaper R11 Plus. So I did a video actually a while back. What was it? Sometime last year where I talked about Reaper 11, to 15 or skulls higher than 10. And I can tell you, based on looking at the history of DDO, I find it extremely unlikely that they do some kind of mass rework of Reaper where they make it a lot harder, because as they discussed in their Q&A a bit, it feels really bad for players who are used to running it, say, R6, to have to go back to R4, R3, whatever. Same with players R10. If they're used to running an R10, they don't want to go back to R7. It feels really bad. So, and it won't be well received. So what the very likely, and this is also, if you want to even go back further in DDO history, this is why we even have Reaper in the first place, in my opinion, because Reaper existed out of necessity because Elite got too easier over time with power creep and with, say, I think looking back, probably some poor designs, in that I think they gave too much help. They added too much self-healing into the game, particularly with say arcane casters, and they really necessitated Reaper mode, in that the Reaper penalty to give players a challenge again really required a new mode. So I think we're going to see a repeat of history here, in that I think absolutely for sure, and you can put money on this. I would put money on this. We're going to see higher skulls than 10 at some point. They didn't confirm that here, but being someone that's been around for DDO a long time, looking at how this game works and how these things, how they deal with power creep, we're going to get Reaper 11, maybe 11 to 15 at some point, maybe 11 to 20 at some point. Yes, this means players will be spread out even more, but it's just they're not going to do a massive nerf to players in the form of a Reaper difficulty jump. Even if on paper that would make the most sense, they're just not going to do it basically because of torches and pitchforks from the player base. So yeah, that's what I think we're going to see at some point, is them going in the direction of adding more skulls. So essentially, things like this is why, going back to their comments at the 49-second mark, that they're really hesitant to, say, touch Reaper or Reaper damage to melee players to try to balance melees. And I still think it's a it is the state in DDO right now that melees, while they certainly are very viable, I think casters are just better. Overall, DDO doesn't, and I did a whole nother video on this a few months ago called "Are Melees Worse Than Ranged and Casters?" If you want to see me talk more about this, go to that video. And I gave out like the whole reasons for this. But essentially, casters are better than melees, even if melees are viable. So I just I don't think they're going to address that by making Reaper easier, just because it adds to the problem of power creep. So they'll have to do it in some other ways, hopefully through like monster design, content design going forward, maybe design of R11 Plus if they go to that. So we'll see. All right, so let's continue on here. 46-minute, 21-second mark. They talked a little bit about chest ransack. They said essentially players will complain from time to time about chest ransack. The argument is, if I want to play DDO, if I want to run the same quest 100 times and farm that same chest, why is there a limit? And Severland's response to that was essentially that it exists to encourage content diversity. The way they want players to play the game is to play a variety of quests. It's probably good for the population overall. Also, they don't want players to burn themselves out. That's the other concern, and that's something it seems like they have seen. So they don't want you to run out of stuff to do and farm content too fast. Also, the other thing is, they didn't say this, but the other thing, guys, if they remove chest ransack, they're going to have to make drop rates lower to compensate. So do you really want chest ransack? I certainly don't want them to extend chest ransack, because even though they won't say this, guys, they would make drop rates lower and things would be harder to farm. My response is this: if you have a problem with chest ransack, just roll an alt. I mean, almost, except for raid gear. And even raid gear now, you can buy the Wish of Inheritance when it comes out if you really want to spend money to do it, to change a bound to character item to bound to account. But the vast majority of stuff in the game is bound to account or not bound. So it's really not a problem, in my opinion. Just roll up an alt. It doesn't have to be amazing. It can be a first life character. It's fine. Just have a character you can go to, just some basic build that works, that can farm, say, elites or R1 or whatever. I mean, I guess it could be a problem if you are really insistent on getting certain mythic Reaper bonuses on your gear, but for the most part, just roll an alt, guys, and then ransack's not a problem. So yeah, so that's their take, and I honestly agree with it, because I don't want to see drop rates go even lower in response to them removing ransack. So Let's continue on. 49-minute, 45-second mark. Will there be a tie-in to the DDO movie of some kind? So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but they said there's nothing they can say about it at this time. But personally, I would be shocked if they do nothing. At the very minimum, they'll probably do a sale to celebrate it or something. But like I said before, my my prediction here is that they release that free content code again. So I could be wholly wrong on that, but I hope they do that. But I think we'll at least see a sale or something. But I doubt we're going to see. They talked about issues here with, say, the getting the likenesses, licensing the likenesses of the actors and stuff. So they can't offer. They very likely can't offer any kind of direct tie to the movies like cosmetics and things. But there's probably going to be something. All right. So 50-minute, 50-second mark. They were asked about adding new dances, so they discussed that, said its dances are kind of race-based, and they said probably not going to add any more races this year, so they don't have any plans to do this right now. They think it's cool, though. I think dances are cool. All right, 55-minute, 42-second mark. They talked a bit about the auto level to 30 to 32 and if it's going to go away. So for those of you all unaware, as of right now, with the cap increase that happened with Isle of Dread last year, your character, if you've already achieved level 32 and then say you epic reincarnate or whatever, you will keep that XP. So you will go directly from 30 to 32. When you get to 30, you get that XP again. So they asked will that go away? It sounds like, based on their comments here, that in future level cap increases, it will continue to exist. So that auto level will exist. So when the cap goes to 34, you'll still auto level to 34. That's what it sounds like from the comments here. But obviously, there's eventually going to be a legendary reincarnation at some point. So at some point, you're going to be able to turn that XP in and go back to 30 and have to regain that XP in exchange for some kind of legendary past life feat, which is obviously coming at some point. All right, just a couple more things here. We're almost done. So at the 59-minute, 22-second mark, they said there's probably going to be more iconics at some point. Kind of already discussed this, but actually we just talked about iconic reincarnation, didn't we? But there will probably be more iconics at some point. Personally, I think the one that needs an iconic the most is some kind of dwarf iconic like Durgar. I think as of right now, dwarf is the only body type that does not have an iconic. There is no dwarf iconic. That's what I want to see most of all, is some kind of Durgar dwarf, maybe like a pick user. Picks don't have a lot of support. That would be really cool. Some kind of dwarf miner iconic. That would be really, really cool. At the 1 hour 30-second mark, and this is the last thing, I also want to clarify, they didn't discuss dwarfs particular or anything like that. It's just my opinion, my what I want to see. At the 1 hour 30-second mark, they talked a little bit about threat and imbue dice, and that they don't necessarily apply to each other. So what they discussed here was that your imbue dice, they don't say if you take negative threat, it doesn't affect your imbue dice, and that wasn't a problem previously because imbue dice were such a small amount of your damage. But with the imbue dice revamp they did this past year, when they added imbue dice and added toggles in the trees and things, this made it so that this I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but this design choice existing became more of a problem because some players who have a lot of imbue dice, but maybe you're a rogue and you have some minus threat gear on, you're still getting aggro. So they said they'd have to look at it, but didn't announce anything specifically other than that. But that is an issue. So if you're not aware of it, yeah, imbue dice don't care about your minus threat or they don't scale on threat. So just be aware of that if you are a build that uses a lot of imbue dice. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. So let me know what you think. We'll be interested in hearing that. Also, as I always say in this video, just be aware that you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt. Unless I specifically said something was confirmed, and I do my best to accurately portray everything the developer said here. If I watched the Q&A twice, hopefully I didn't make any mistakes or didn't misrepresent anything that the developer said, but recorded and said. But the video is there in the description. If you want to see all the context, you can watch that video. I laid out the timestamps for you. So if you want to see something for yourself, you can go look at the context where I told you to go look at it. So guys, that's gonna be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.